During my medical school rotations, I found that people were only able to make so much progress with their bodies if their mental health was not well. If people were depressed, if they were anxious, it created complications with their heart disease, with their diabetes, for sure. Then I found that even as we try to treat the mental health of our clients, their mental health then creates also challenges with the body in regards to inflammation and the progression of chronic disease. So I wanted to find a way that I could learn so that I could try to manage both of those things, to be able to treat the physical aspect and the mental health aspect.
It is so important. I think a lot of people don't always realize how all three of those things really go together. If your mind is not right, your body won't feel right. But what does the complete reset mean in the context of mental health?
There have been many people who've wanted to create change, and they have seen their providers hoping to get better with depression, anxiety, psychotic illness, substance use disorder, or addiction. They've wanted to get better. And where we are in the science with our interventions, we're able to help. There are a lot of people who still feel as if they could feel better. I am no longer in a mental health facility. I'm no longer struggling to get out of bed, but my life is not fulfilling. My anxiety really isn't well controlled. My motivation and my ability to enjoy life is not where I want it to be. Let's take a different mindset. Let's take a different approach that is more comprehensive in being able to help us meet those goals. So not only am I going to do what's conventional or typical with my mental health, but I'm going to do some things that are unconventional, that we typically don't consider. Spiritual exercises and practices, being able to change things that I do with my body that may have some positive
Welcome to the very first episode of The Complete Reset with Dr. Quinton Moss, the show where science meets meaning and mind-body-spirit transformation really begins. So today, before we talk about depression, neuroplasticity, addiction, faith, or lifestyle medicine, we're starting with the foundation. So who is Dr. Quinton Moss? What is a complete reset? And why does healing require all three dimensions of the human experience, the mind, the body, and the spirit? So let's begin this journey. I know I'm so excited to be here. It's right on my alley of interest. So, Dr. Moss, how excited are you to kick off your podcast? First episode.
Very excited. This is hopefully going to open up some knowledge for some people, help some people, and allow for them to make some steps forward.
Absolutely. And with the new year coming in as well, it's also perfect timing.
That's
Um,
right.
Definitely can be hard on people. I know a lot of people are in the mindset shift to kind of restart and rebuild right now. So, before we get into that, and Dr. Moss, before we talk about mental health or brain science, can you take us back a little to the beginning? Where did this calling to treat the whole person, mind, body, and spirit really come from in your life?
I think it started very early. I was raised in a church, raised by my grandparents, had an understanding of, I thought an understanding of God at that time. And even at that time, I felt that God wanted me to do something to be able to help people, whether it's to teach, to provide understanding. So I was, teaching in church, doing Sunday school, Bible study, and then eventually, when I was thinking about, what did I want to do with my life, I was given a great opportunity. And that opportunity was to study science at Norfolk State University as a pre-med major, which then allowed for me to transition into, Eastern Virginia Medical School, where I was able to do my studies. And while there, with the thinking that I had, I thought that I was going to be a surgeon, right? And I think people often think that they're going to be surgeons when they go to med school. But through that experience, I was able to help people in primary care settings and see how managing the body was so important, not only to helping them with their ailments, but just trying to get, longevity. And then I was able to do my mental health or psychiatric rotation. And in there, I was able to see people transform their lives, specifically people who had post traumatic stress disorder, veterans who had experienced a great deal and being able to reconnect with their communities and feel wellness. And from that point, I said, there's a way that I can combine mental health and physical health. And at the same time, God placed on my heart to be able to start preaching. And I was licensed in the gospel ministry, and that kind of brought it all together, mind, body, and spirit, trying to find some way in which I can incorporate what I know about mental health or psychiatry, what we know about the body, and also what the spirit brings in wrapping it all together.
Absolutely, that's so powerful and such a unique experience to be able to combine all
Mm.
3 of those things. And most psychiatrists don't particularly get dual training in family medicine and psychiatry. So, why was that so important for you to really understand the body as deeply as the mind?
As I was doing my medical school rotations, I found that people were only able to make so much progress with their bodies if their mental health was not well. If people were depressed, if they were anxious, it created complications with their heart disease, with their diabetes. For sure, it creates complications with their obesity, particularly with pain syndromes. And then I found that even as we try to treat the mental health of our clients, their mental health then creates also challenges with the body in regards to inflammation and the progression of chronic disease. So I wanted to find a way that I could learn so that I could try to manage both of those things, to be able to treat the physical aspect and the mental health aspect, being able to weigh the balances and counterbalances of interventions and medications that I use to treat those things. And that eventually led to me opening up my practice, modern psychiatry and wellness, here, just outside of Cincinnati, Ohio.
It is so important. I think a lot of people don't always realize how all 3 of those things really go together. If your mind is not right, your body won't feel right. And when people tend to hear the word reset, right,
Yeah.
they usually think of maybe starting over.
hmm
But what does the complete reset mean in the context of mental health?
Well, I will say this. There have been many people who've wanted to create change, and they have seen their providers hoping to get better with depression, anxiety, psychotic illness, substance use disorder, or addiction. They've wanted to get better. And where we are in the science with our interventions, we're able to help many people. And as we've had more awareness, we've been able to help many more people. But even with our interventions of different types of psychotherapy, with the interventions of medications, and there are new medications and treatments that are coming out all the time that are effective, there are a lot of people who still feel as if they could feel better. I'm no longer in a mental health facility. I'm no longer struggling to get out of bed, but my life is not fulfilling. My anxiety really isn't well controlled. My motivation and my ability to enjoy life is not where I want it to be. And so now, in addition to what you're doing, in addition to seeing your psychiatrist or your mental health provider, in addition to seeing your therapist, let's take a different mindset. Let's take a different approach that is more comprehensive in being able to help us meet those goals. So not only am I going to do what's conventional or typical with my mental health, but I'm going to do some things that are unconventional that we typically don't consider. Spiritual exercises and practices, being able to change things that I do with my body that may have some positive influence or impact with what's going on with my mental health.
Absolutely. I think it's so important. And it always has been, but more so now than ever. There's
hmm
always some stressor. We're living in a crazy world. I
Yeah.
think everyone's mental health definitely needs a lot of attention now, particularly as well.
hmm
And I know you've said something powerful about healing requires the mind, the body, and the spirit. So, can you really break down why all 3 truly matter and what happens when even one, for example, is missing?
hmm I'll probably start with what we all can relate to, and that's what we feel with our bodies, right? And so we try to, as best we can, maximize our bodies with how we eat, how we move, the activities that we participate in. When our body is injured, we try to do what's necessary to bring that to improve. But our thoughts, the way that we perceive ourselves, the way that we perceive our environment and our future, how we manage stress sends signals to the body that either perpetuates or facilitates healing or it creates disease. So even if I'm trying to be in the tip top shape that I want to be and I want to recover from this physical ailment, if my mind or my thoughts are not well, I am creating a barrier to healing and maybe creating disease. If my mind is well, I may be able to accelerate healing. I may be able to maximize my wellness. One of the areas that we see this is with people who suffer from cancer. And we know that the way that we think about our bodies, our future, and the way that we think about treatments and the cancer itself influences the outcomes and the survival rates of those who suffer from that condition. So that shows to some degree the tie in between the mind and the body, right? The body, what I feel, and my thoughts, and my mind, and how I can manage that. When we think about the spirit gives the roadmap. It gives the blueprint for why all of this matters. Now, the greatest question I think in human existence is why am I here and what is the purpose of my life? If I'm tied into something that's much greater, much bigger, that we may see as all powerful and all knowing, now I have an answer why. I have a blueprint. I have guidelines. I have all these things that give me instructions on how I'm supposed to think, how I'm supposed to engage with other people, how I'm supposed to manage this temple of my body that I've been given, all of that now makes sense for a divine purpose that's been given to me specifically. And that's kind of how that all ties in. Not to mention that some of the spiritual practices and exercises help rewire the brain. They change how the brain functions. And there have been studies that have demonstrated this.
Absolutely, that's so important. And I know one of your signature teachings is thoughts are energy.
Yeah.
So, can you explain what you mean by that and why some thinking patterns are actually so central to mental health?
Yeah. So if I were to think about the thought as at its basic level, there are cells in the brain that communicate with each other and they create a circuit, and that circuit is thoughts. And that circuit includes the exchange of energy and chemicals for a certain message. And that's kind of how we perceive that. That energy is not just created or dissipates anywhere. There's a law when we think about physics that energy is neither created nor destroyed. That energy is actually bound within the body to create changes. That energy creates changes for healing. That energy creates changes for me to have a greater awareness and use of my muscles and limbs so I can fight or run, right? Those thoughts, how we perceive ourselves in the world, is converted into ways that allow for our bodies to be able to do sometimes some very amazing things. But in addition to that, the way that we think, that energy actually creates energy that exists outside of us. In our near proximity, the way that we think influences the energy that others can perceive about us. We've all had the experience of having conversations with people that we vibe with, people that we don't, or when someone enters the room and in a very subtle way, how our thoughts or even sometimes our bodies can change in response to that. I believe that the way that we think not only influences our bodies, it influences even our engagement with other people, but also it influences some of the greater outcomes that create some of the events of our lives.
Absolutely. And like you said, when someone walks in a room, you can feel their energy precede them sometimes, whether it's good or bad. And when people walk in and have that good energy, that bright energy, and people gravitate towards them, it's such a powerful thing. So,
Hmm.
whatever your thoughts are that are your energy, it's something that can, for example, fill up a room or have that effect on others. It's super common when people think depression, they think sadness, or even
Certainly.
sometimes laziness or some kind of negative feeling around the word depression. But from a brain science perspective, what's really happening?
Yeah. So if I were to go back to that example of these cells and how these cells communicate with each other for us to be able to complete tasks, whether it's actually physically doing something or talking or thinking or focusing, when we have cells that have been weakened, or cells that unfortunately die off and in groups are not able to complete those tasks, we do feel that sadness. So we feel that lack of pleasure and drive. These cells not functioning well affects our ability to have positive thoughts. So then we think less positive about the future and we think more negative about our current circumstances. And sometimes these thoughts can become so dark that people think about challenging their own existence. Why am I here? Be better off if I didn't exist. So we all know that emotional and kind of thought component of that. But also, when these cells are not functioning well, and I talk about this energy and how we're sending signals to the rest of our bodies, then we start to send signals of fatigue, increased sensitivity to pain. Everything takes increased effort. Over time, if we're depressed, if depression is severe enough, we can now start to have, believe it or not, heart complications. The signals that our brain now sends to our heart becomes impaired. Our ability to have appropriate heartbeats become altered, and we become a greater risk, believe it or not, for arrhythmias, for heart attacks, for strokes, really out of this long lasting severe depression. Not to mention changes in cortisol. I know that's a big buzzword today, thinking about cortisol. But yes, this cortisol can create changes that allow for us to have greater risk of diabetes, weight gain, and increased pain. We believe that this creates a further cascade that people who are depressed for a long enough period of time or of severity may be at greater risk even for dementia and cancer. So we think about depression, we think about sadness and lack of motivation. That's one way to think about that. But when we think about the cascade of what it does to the body and all the damage that it does, it becomes this chronic the illness that really, affects our quality of life, chronic disease, and life expectancy.
That's so interesting. And I think that's so important for you to be spreading that knowledge because so many people don't really realize how depression can have such an effect on your health. So you're depressed, especially even, it's winter, seasonal depression, people that are suffering from loss or grief and just every little thing that seemed easy at one point if you're suffering from depression can seem so severe. Getting out of bed, day-to-day
Mhm.
activities can be so hard when you're struggling with depression that it's so interesting to really think about how it could actually have such an effect on your health because some people tend to think mental health is this bucket and physical health is this bucket
Yeah.
and how they intertwine.
It's interesting you say that because, we have, primary care doctors, internists, specialists, and they'll see someone who has diabetes, and man, we can't get this diabetes under control. Heart disease, and I can't seem to be able to help this person to regain their function, or these other chronic diseases. And we prescribe medications, we prescribe physical therapies to be able to help them improve, but no one is looking at how depressed or anxious this person is,
Mhm.
because it's hard for us to make gains in those areas when someone is very depressed or anxious. And so the goal is, if we're able to flip this thing with depression, and not only that, but we can have people who navigate towards even greater levels of wellness, that we can really, turn back some of these outcomes that we see with diabetes, obesity, heart disease, kidney disease, by affecting their mental health.
Yeah, it's so interesting to think how it could actually maybe even start with mental health and or maybe not particularly start, but have such a drastic impact from mental health on these physical challenges that people are dealing with.
Hmm.
And
And
I know
we,
that you often say sleep, food, and movement are medicine. And speaking about depression, those things can really take over. Some people might not sleep when they're depressed or oversleep or not
hmm
eat or
hmm
overeat.
hmm
And like with depression, those daily things can be so hard. So you say that sleep, food, and movement are medicine, but why does the body play such a powerful role in in emotional health?
I believe that God has given us the ability to restore and even reset ourselves every day. He does. And the way that we're able to accomplish that in part is by sleep.
Mhm,
When we're able to get the quantity and quality of sleep, when we're able to appropriately go through the stages of sleep, particularly with REM sleep, there are a
mhm,
few things that happen. When we think about our mental health, our centers of our brain that create, emotional regulation and being able to keep a stable mood, those things are reinforced or improved as we're able to get the right amount of REM sleep. We think about our ability to focus, maintain attention. Those areas actually get improved with the right amount of sleep. There's a belief, and science has proven that when we sleep the right amount, our brain goes through a rinsing, removing of toxins that actually improve our well-being and perhaps reduce our risk of dementia. So those are some of the things that occur when we get the right amount of sleep. Now, if we think about trying to become high performers, I'm this executive or I have this high powered job or this very demanding job and I want to perform well and I need to memorize things well and I need to be able to be all in on these conversations. The way that that begins is not the morning that you wake up and trying to say an affirmation that you're going to do that. Where that begins is really the night before, making sure that you're getting the proper amount of sleep. Aside from the mental health standpoint, there's the physical health. We think about our immune system. We think about heart health and reducing heart disease. All of those things are influenced by making sure that we get the proper amount of sleep. So yes, if I could write a prescription that was able to give people 6 to 7 steps to a good night's sleep, great sleep hygiene, and they were to follow that for sure, many Americans would be much better physically and mentally. So that's just sleep. When we think about movement, exercise is vital. We weren't created to sit behind a desk in front of a computer like this all day long. We weren't created for that. Our bodies were created to run, walk, jog, grab, climb. And unfortunately, with how our civilization is set up, we're not doing much of that. So we have to create movement. And so when we do exercise, believe it or not, we're able to secrete or release this chemical that strengthens those brain cells or those neurons to make better connections. And when we're able to do that with neuroplasticity, we're able to improve our mood, we're able to improve our focus and concentration, and we're able to reduce the amount of inflammation that our brain sends to the rest of the body. And then, of course, the way that we eat also dictates not only just the physical stuff when we think about heart disease, diabetes, and weight gain, but how we eat influences our mood. If we're high caffeinated folks, if we're folks who are eating a great deal of sugar, then we're more likely to be people who have difficulty maintaining a stable mood. But if we're able to eat the right foods, we're able to actually change the partners that live with us. So there are bacteria that live within us that are really our partners that help create these healthy signals that come from the gut and go back up to the brain which improve brain functioning. But when we're eating a lot of sugar, usually eating a lot of high processed foods, we actually kill off the good bacteria. And this allows for inflammation signals to be sent to the brain, which then disseminate that to the rest of the body. So, how we eat is also an important part of medicine in helping us to get better with our mental health and our physical health.
And it's so important too, because if you are struggling with mental health and you are depressed, you'll likely crave, fast food or
Oh,
not want to get up
yes.
and move and want to Uber Eats, McDonald's at an abnormal time of day because you're sad and you're depressed and you don't feel like doing the things that are important for your body and moving. So it is in a way a vicious cycle too. That's
It
important.
is. Thank you for saying that. It is a vicious cycle. And that's why I think it's hard for us individuals to do this by ourselves.
Uh-huh.
Sleep is poorly regulated when we're depressed. The way we eat, you mentioned, we desire the foods that actually hurt us, believe it or not, when we're depressed. So having some accountability and someone to help us with that when we're depressed, I don't want to go to the gym. I don't want to go for a walk when I'm depressed, but that's the very thing that helps us to get there. So this whole thing of a complete reset really challenges us. They're unfortunately having to do hard things in order to push back against depression and anxiety. And a lot of us do well in pushing back with these hard things when we have some support or some guidance.
Absolutely. I think it's so important to have that guidance and that support because sometimes, especially with depression, it's hard to push yourself. It's hard to even, I want to go out and get some sun and take that 5-minute walk can be such a challenge. So having that support and motivation is super, I think, crucial overall. And and in terms of spirituality or meaning or purpose, why is it such an essential part of the complete reset?
hmm Because that overrides everything. It does. I have this body, I have this mind, and if I have some understanding that there is a greater goal in which I'm supposed to use this, then it gives me the motivation to be able to maintain that. In addition, when we're connected with something that gives us hope, that instills power, that gives us some form of redemption, and gives us a vehicle in which we can give to others, we can forgive others, and we can have gratitude for the things around us. It actually transforms how the brain functions. When we're able to do those things, then we start to have less of these thought patterns, which sometimes go in a loop that lead ultimately to greater depression, grief, anxiety, and agitation. We're able to let loose of those things when we're able to, find things that we're grateful for that's outside of us, that we know that something greater has given us, we start to now look for other amazing things that are happening around us. And that changes how we think about our existence. And for many people, it helps over time to lift their depression. So the spiritual component is very important. For me, my faith is a follower of Jesus Christ, and for me personally, that gives me, I think, a great deal of power, a great deal of acceptance, a great deal of ongoing hope that at times kind of transcends the situation that I'm in. So I'm hoping other people can experience that with their spirituality.
Absolutely. And I think it goes back to, like you said, purpose, having that
Mm,
spirituality, that purpose, that drive to really keep going and taking care of yourself as well,
mm,
taking care of your mind, your body. And speaking about, like you said, religion and spirituality, but people in churches often suffer in silence from depression or addiction. And those are two things that can often be viewed from a shameful standpoint, or people suffer in silence because of shame or being uncomfortable or things of that nature. So, What do you want the faith community to better understand about that whole aspect of suffering and silence, from depression or addiction or anything like
Hmm.
that?
Yeah. I think the greatest thing is that, I think all of our faith traditions, speak of not coming to necessarily condemn folks who are suffering, but finding a way to uplift and empower. And through our faith and spirituality, we have a way of really lifting people from darkness, from lowness, from pain to a place where they really can thrive and be well. This connection to something that's much greater than us allows for us to be able to do things sometimes that are supernatural. They're beyond our ability to do, only being able to do those things because we're connected to something that's much bigger, that's of a spiritual scope. But the harm has been that the church has criticized, created shame, that people feel depressed because if you feel depressed, then you must not be a person who believes. Or if you feel depressed, then you're someone who must have committed something wrong. And that's not necessarily the case. And we need to find a way to kind of foster, faith and strength alongside what we do for mental and physical health so people can use this superpower of their spiritual life to be able to, lift themselves up. So, my challenge is for pastors and church leaders, learn more about mental health, learn how to recognize when some people may have challenges, and learn how you can be a support and refer people on to get mental health, and how you, as a team member, can be a part of the treatment plan and people getting better. And I'm seeing more and more pastors take that approach. And there are people in their churches or synagogues or mosque being well served by this.
Absolutely. And you touched on something too about it somewhat being shamed, but also people having challenges and not needing to be embarrassed or feel shameful about having these challenges.
Yeah.
No one's perfect. Sometimes people are born into situations they can't control. People make mistakes. So I think it's very important to seek out that help. And if you're in a place of power to help us judgment free, because people need help, and taking that first step as someone who needs help is often so super hard. So if anyone is experiencing that and they're going out of their way to be part of community or part of a religious place, I think that that's often difficult. So I think it's important to recognize that when people
Hmm.
are searching for help. And I think community, regardless of religious beliefs, is something important for everyone. Everyone can benefit from
Yes.
community. And I know that's something that's important to you that we'll touch on a little bit later, but finding that community is super helpful, especially if you're in like a dark place, for example. Having people that
Mhm.
you can reach out to and accept you without judgment or understand where you're coming from is super, super crucial.
Community is important and acceptance is important. One of the things that we've seen in the past when we think about medical conditions and stigma that kind of goes along with it, we've had, decades where people have suffered cancer. And cancer used to be one of those highly stigmatized conditions that you just kind of whispered about. No one openly talked about it. And that was the same way it was in the church. But now people can be more open with their challenges with various types of cancers. And now, which is, I think, a great reformation, is that people are celebrated in their fight against cancer,
So
in the church. So I think that's wonderful. I would like for, when we think about depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, that with those conditions, that we're no longer whispering in the shadows about that in church, that we can remove a great deal of that stigma, and that those individuals can also be celebrated for their fight, for their health, in regards to these mental health conditions.
absolutely, that's a good point too, in terms of, like you said, cancer and kind of whispering about, having this disease that absolutely is no one's fault.
Mhm,
and being
exactly.
able to celebrate that the same way now it's important that mental disorders are getting that type of recognition as well. Like you said, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, all these things that were, in a way shamed and whispered, and AIDS is a huge one as well. So
Yes.
those, you know, illnesses, whether they're physical or mental, with all the stigma around, it's so important to be able to share that and be celebrated for your fight because it's no one's fault, right? Like, this
Mhm.
is an unfortunate thing that people are going through, and being able to welcome those who are brave enough to look for support and seek help is super important. And I'm sure a lot of people will be listening now who may feel stuck mentally or physically or even spiritually. So, what would you say is the very first step in the beginning or beginning a complete reset?
The hope for change. If you begin with a desire for change, for something to be different, that I think for many people is the biggest hurdle. Just the belief that things could be different 3, 6, 9 months from now. My existence could be very different for what it is now. When we've been depressed for so long or anxious for so long or have some of these chronic conditions, it's hard to even believe that life could be any different than what it is. So the first step, I say is to challenge the notion that your life could be better. Secondly, I think that after that, having that conversation with your provider. Hey, I want to do something different for 2026. I want to take my health to another level. I know we haven't quite figured out what's happening with my depression, anxiety, or these other things. But I'm thinking about taking an approach that thinks about mind, body, and spirit. Let's check all the boxes to make sure we're doing what we need to do in regards to my physical health and my mental health. And then with that, I'm going to take it to the next team member that I would need. And that next team member is often a family member, a friend, a spiritual leader who can bring in this other support when we think about spirituality and being able to do that all within a community. I would like for people to think about joining the community that we are creating that speaks to mind, body, and spirit, where people can learn from some of the things that I've studied, but also learn from each other and support each other as they're taking that journey. Because no one should take this journey by themselves. It's hard, very difficult road. So hey, let's kind of lean in and support each other with this. And I'm hoping that maybe some people may want to take that step as well.
Absolutely. I love that. What you said about existence can be different or better in 6 months or a year. I think that's such an
Mm,
important insight. I'm going to hold on to that one myself because
mhm,
it's hard, especially if you're dealing with health complications or health concerns or mental health or even issues with spirituality. Just having that insight of things can get better, things can be different just because
mm,
it's like this at this moment. Realizing that and knowing that it doesn't have to be like this forever is something so powerful and really could shift your mindset. So I think that that's a great thing to acknowledge, really,
mm.
and quote. And so, what do you think that, or what do you hope rather, that listeners can really gain from this show? So,
Mm.
when someone completes season one, what transformation would you want them to feel?
Oh gosh, I hope that life is just totally different.
Hmm.
You know, um, for many of the people that I've treated, they've been, 4 and 5 decades having a very skewed look at life and their existence and being very pessimistic about how much of that they can improve. So I want people to feel empowered that within their hands, there are these tools in mind, body, and spirit that allow for them to be able to experience life in a very new way. And so, yes, continue seeing your providers for your mental health, for your physical health, all of those things. I'm not asking anyone to change any of that, but adding these things on, I think that people will see their life and their future much different. I believe that we only get one go at it here on earth, and it hurts me, saddens me when I see people suffer and they're not able to get the most out of that one go. So I want folks to be able to kind of tap into these tools and, take the brakes off and being able to live life to the full. And that's what I hope to be able to share with people.
Absolutely. And it's so important that you say that too, because sometimes people don't particularly have that outlook, right? Maybe they've never heard someone say that. Maybe this will be the first time someone hears someone say that, which may seem simple or obvious or common to some, but some people may have never heard that. So it can be life changing and make them feel a sense of empowerment. And as you talked about having friends or family, not maybe people don't have that or have that community. So it's super important to hear someone say that out loud and welcome them and encourage that mindset shift of, in a few months, your life can be different.
Yes. We pray that for everyone, but just take the first step. And the first step is just being open to believe that things most definitely could be better for us.
Absolutely. And beyond all of this, you are also building a community around these ideas. So
Yes.
what can listeners really expect from the reset community as it launches? And tell us a little bit more about that.
So there are about maybe 14 concepts that I cover in regards to how we can promote mind, body, and spirit. Some of these things we'll talk about in detail on the podcast. But within the community, people will get access to additional information, written information. There'll be live discussion sessions that I'll be participating in that people can ask questions and get some feedback. So, as an educational tool. So I'm looking forward to that component and growing that and having people get access to that. And as people experience, some level of growth with that, then they share with other people, so they can also experience that. So that's coming soon on the school platform that people will be able to join.
Amazing. And it's like you said, the platform, so it'll all be online.
Yes.
Amazing. I'm definitely excited to learn more about that as well as the podcast progresses and maybe even join it myself. It definitely sounds like something that's beneficial. So I'm excited to dive into that a little bit more in future episodes as well.
Hey,
And
Layla, can I also share something else?
yeah,
Y-
absolutely. Please do.
So, my practice is modern psychiatry and wellness.
Mhm.
We're here just outside of Cincinnati. And one of the other opportunities is that for people who live in the Cincinnati area, if they want to be able to get this in a more clinical setting, we do have this as a clinical group that'll be occurring once a week.
Oh,
So, it's a 2 hours long. We provide dinner when they come, and we go through these concepts each week with exercises and feedback. So, if folks are interested in being a part of that in a clinical setting, we have that at Modern Psychiatry and Wellness, which is my practice that's located just outside of Cincinnati.
that's amazing. And can they look online to get more information? What's the exact
Yes,
website as
they
well?
can look online to get more information, go to our website, and the information will be there.
Absolutely. And we'll make sure to link all of those websites below as well. And Dr. Moss, thank you so much for laying the foundation for what's going to be such a powerful journey. I know I'm very happy to be able to have a one-on-one experience with you and really spread this knowledge. And to everyone listening, welcome to the Complete Reset. And if today's conversation resonated with you, make sure you follow the show so you don't miss an episode. We have lots of good information coming up. And if you want deeper tools, guided exercises, and community conversations around mind, body, and spirit healing, be sure to join the Reset community using the link in the show's notes. We'll make sure that that is all linked below. And thank you again, Dr. Moss. I can't wait to talk to you soon in episode 2. And until then, I will talk to you later.
Hey, nice talking to you. Thank you very much.